I never expected that a quiet evening at home would turn into one of the most unforgettable moments of my life. My father sat beside me in silence. And in that silence, something shifted between us. Something I couldn't have understood at 20 years old, but would carry with me forever. It was more than a pause in conversation. It was a revelation of connection, trust, and the unspoken love we often overlook. That night, I learned that sometimes the most profound lessons come without words, and the people closest to us can surprise us in ways we never imagine. Greetings, dear listeners. Before I begin telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support our channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. I had never been particularly close to my dad, Raymond, in the way most daughters might describe their relationship with their fathers. There were conversations, yes, short, polite exchanges about school, work, or weekend plans, but nothing deeper. Nothing that made my chest feel full. Nothing that made me feel like he truly knew me beyond the surface. I was 20 and life was busy. College consumed most of my waking hours, and when I came home, the house felt different somehow. Quieter than I remembered from childhood. It wasn't just silence. It was the kind of stillness that makes you aware of everything. The familiar hum of the fridge. The soft tick of the wall clock. The faint scent of his aftershave drifting from the hallway. Clean and sharp, mixed with something older, like leather and cedar from his chair. It all seemed to settle around me differently, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. It was one of those late February evenings where winter refused to leave. Outside the kitchen window, the sky was a deep slate gray, the kind that made bare branches look skeletal against the fading light. The air pressed against the glass like it wanted to come in. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, an essay blinking at me like a judgmental teacher. But my mind wasn't on the paper. It was on that strange heaviness I couldn't fully explain. A tiredness that wasn't physical. More like the feeling of being young and overwhelmed, and realizing nobody gives you a manual for what to do when you're carrying emotions you can't name. I stared at the radiator as it hummed softly, watching the heat rise like invisible waves. And then I heard his footsteps. Quiet. Familiar. Low. My dad entered the kitchen, and something about the way he moved felt different. Usually he'd walk in and throw out a question, something simple. How was school? You eat yet? Need anything? Small talk. Background noise. But that night he said nothing. He just pulled out the chair beside me and sat down. And we sat there. Together. In silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. It was more like the air had thickened. Like the room knew something important was waiting to happen, but neither of us had the words to start it. I glanced at him. The slight lines at the corners of his eyes. The way his jaw tensed and relaxed, like he was swallowing thoughts. His fingers tapping lightly on the table in an absent rhythm. Tap, 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 like he was trying to keep time with something only he could hear. He looked tired. Not worked a long shift tired. More like carrying something alone for too long tired. For some reason, an unexpected urge rose in me, to reach out, to bridge the gap that had existed between us for years. Dad, I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. He looked at me, eyebrows lifting slightly, like he was surprised I had broken the silence. Are you okay? He hesitated. And I realized how rare it was for him to admit anything resembling uncertainty. For a moment, he just stared at the table. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. I'm fine, Eliana, he said. But he didn't sound fine. He sounded careful, like he was choosing each word as if it could either build something or break it. Then he paused, as if the sentence wasn't enough, as if something else was sitting behind it, waiting to be released. And the silence returned. But this silence felt different. Not empty. Not forced. Charged. I kept my eyes on the window, watching the last light leak out of the sky. Outside, the world was quiet, muffled by winter. But inside, the kitchen felt warmer than usual. Not because of the radiator. Because of him. 'Cause we were both there. Present. Not trying to escape into phones or TV or distractions. Just being. Finally he spoke again. His voice was softer this time, careful and deliberate. You know, he said, I've always been proud of you. My chest tightened. It was such a simple sentence. 8 words. But it hit me like someone had opened a door in a house I thought was locked forever. I wanted to laugh at how easy it sounded. And yet my throat burned, like my body didn't believe it had permission to receive those words. I had grown up thinking he might never say things like that. That the quiet between us was just how life had to be. That fathers like mine loved by providing, not by speaking. But hearing him now, quietly, honestly, felt like a bridge being built plank by plank over a river I didn't even realize I had been drowning in. I know, Dad, I said, but the words came out shaky, as if they weren't sure where to land. And then, because something in me needed to say it back, even if my pride didn't want to. I feel the same about you. He didn't respond right away. He just sat there staring forward. But I saw it. A shift in his face. The smallest softening, like he was trying not to show how much that meant. We didn't move. We didn't fill the moment with jokes or awkward follow-up questions. We just existed in that shared space where no one had to prove anything. And that's when I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The slight tremor in his hands when he picked up his mug. The way his shoulders slumped like he was carrying invisible weight. The way his eyes, when they looked at me, held something gentle that I had never been old enough to recognize. He wasn't just Dad. He was human, fragile, real. And for the first time I felt close to him, not because we were talking but because we weren't. At some point, the quiet stretched long enough that it became its own language. I could feel the words we didn't say pressing into the air between us. And somehow, that felt safer than filling the space with casual chatter. The kitchen light flickered above us, casting long shadows on the wall. And I realized I would remember this moment forever. The way his jacket smelled faintly of cedar. The creak of his chair as he shifted. The low hum of the fridge. The chill of the window near my hand. Every small sensation felt magnified, charged with the realization that we were sharing something rare. A pause in life where connection was possible without explanation. It was in that silence that I began to understand my father in a new way. Not just as the man who set rules and expected grades, but as someone capable of deep reflection. Someone who had carried burdens quietly. Someone who, like me, sometimes needed the world to slow down. And as I sat there, I understood something else too. Growing up doesn't only mean learning who you are. It means learning who the people who raised you truly are. Beneath the roles, beneath the routines, beneath the distance. By the time we stood to leave the kitchen, the sky outside had turned almost velvety black, dotted faintly with stars. Felt lighter. Not because any problem had been solved, but because something inside me had unclenched. There was no dramatic declaration. No grand confession. Just a quiet understanding. And somehow, that was enough. More than enough. As I walked toward my room, I felt a shift inside me. Something fundamental had changed. Raymond had given me a gift far beyond words. The knowledge that love can exist quietly, patiently, and still shape the heart long after the moment has passed. I didn't know then that this would be the first of many moments like this. Moments that would teach me trust, empathy, and the subtle beauty of human connection. But I did know one thing. I would never forget that night. And in a way, I didn't need to. The memory was already etched into me. After that night, something in our home felt different, though I couldn't quite explain it. The silence between my dad and me no longer felt empty. It carried weight, but not a heavy one. A comforting one. Like a quiet acknowledgement that we were both present, fully aware of each other's existence without needing to fill every second with words. Over the next few days, I found myself glancing at him differently. Noticing things I had always seen but never really noticed. The way he fidgeted with his coffee mug in the morning, thumb rubbing the handle like a habit he couldn't put down. The subtle smile he gave when he read something in the newspaper that amused him. The careful way he folded laundry like each shirt and towel deserved respect. One evening, a few days after that kitchen moment, I came home later than usual. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the world painted in deep purples and blues. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon, and the scent pulled me toward the kitchen like a memory. My dad was there at the counter peeling apples. He was so focused it almost startled me. The knife moved in a steady rhythm, the peel curling down in one long ribbon, unbroken. It made me think of patience, of someone who knows how to take their time. "Hey, Dad," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, and for a moment his face held a private smile, like he had been expecting me without realizing it. "Hey, Eliana," he replied, calm and unhurried. "Want to help?" I nodded and stepped beside him. It was such an ordinary act, peeling apples. But it felt extraordinary. Not because of what we were doing. Because of what we weren't doing. We weren't avoiding each other. We weren't rushing away. We weren't trapped behind awkwardness. We moved together in an unspoken rhythm, handing each other slices, trading the knife carefully, pushing the bowl closer when it got full. And the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was natural. Like we had found a doorway into each other's worlds and didn't need to talk to prove we belonged there. "You know," he said finally, voice low, "it's funny how little things can mean the most." I glanced at him. "What do you mean?" He looked down at the apples, then back at me. "Moments like this," he said. "Just being here. Doing something simple. Sometimes that's where you learn the most about someone." His words weren't a lecture. They weren't dramatic. They were just honest. And that honesty warmed me in a way I didn't expect. As the days passed, we started carving out small rituals without even planning it. Sometimes it was breakfast together before I rushed to class. Sometimes it was sitting side by side on the couch, letting the TV play while we barely watched it, just existing in the same room. And one afternoon, we found an old photo album tucked away in the attic. The cover was worn, the plastic sleeves slightly yellowed with time. When we opened it, I saw a younger version of my dad I had never met. Raymond smiling wide with friends. Raymond holding tools, grease on his hands, proud like he had built something real. Raymond standing in front of a car I had only ever heard about in stories. I had always assumed I knew my dad. But the album made me realize how much of him had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for me to be old enough to look closer. One Saturday afternoon, he suggested we go for a walk. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The path behind our house wound through quiet woods, bare branches reaching overhead like thin fingers. Sunlight filtered through in streaks that danced across the ground. We didn't talk much at first. Our footsteps crunching leaves. Distant birds calling. The world felt like it had slowed down just for us. Eventually he broke the silence. "Eliana," he said, voice steady but gentle, "do you ever feel like life is moving too fast?" I thought about it for a moment, the wind tugging at my hair. "All the time," I admitted. "It's like everyone's racing ahead, and I'm just trying not to fall behind." He nodded slowly. "I used to feel that way too," he said. "It's easy to get caught up in what's next, what's expected, and forget what's right in front of you." We walked in silence again, but this time it wasn't the silence of distance. It was the silence of understanding, a shared acknowledgement that life can be overwhelming. But we had each other to lean on, even without saying much. By the time we returned home, the sky had turned deep indigo and the first stars were beginning to appear. The house welcomed us back with its familiar warmth. And as we stepped inside, I realized something I hadn't expected. These moments, simple, quiet, almost unremarkable to anyone else, were shaping me, teaching me patience, teaching me empathy, teaching me how to notice the people I love while they're still right in front of me. That night in my room, I replayed the day in my mind. My perception of my father had shifted entirely. He was no longer just an authority figure or a distant presence. He was someone with his own struggles, his own regrets, his own quiet reflections. Someone who cared deeply, even if he hadn't always known how to show it. And I understood something fundamental about connection. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't built through grand gestures. They're built through attention, through patience, through a willingness to simply be present. As I drifted to sleep, I felt gratitude and something else too. Anticipation. Like this was only the beginning. The next few weeks felt almost dreamlike. Even mundane things felt different now. The sound of water boiling in the morning. The creak of the stairs. The way the living room light hit the curtains at sunset. It all carried a sense of comfort I hadn't noticed before, like my home had been waiting for me to arrive emotionally, not just physically. One afternoon, I sat in the living room sketching in my notebook. My pencil moved across the page, tracing light and shadow, trying to capture something I couldn't name. My dad sat in his armchair, newspaper open, brow slightly furrowed. I glanced up, half expecting him to stay distant. But even when he didn't look at me, I felt his presence. Like an anchor. "Hey," I said softly, almost testing the air. He folded the paper slowly, looked up, and gave me that small knowing smile. "Hey, Eliana," he said warmly. "Working on something." I held up the notebook. "Just sketching. Trying to capture the light." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it's the quiet things that matter most, isn't it?" I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he was right. And somehow, it felt like he was speaking to a part of me I hadn't been paying attention to. Later that evening, we cooked dinner together. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and onions sautéing in butter, and the clatter of pans created a rhythm that felt strangely intimate. We moved around each other easily, passing ingredients, brushing shoulders, not flinching away. No rush, no tension, just mutual care. As we worked, my dad began talking about when he was my age, traveling with friends through a small town far from home. His voice carried a softness I hadn't heard before. He described winding streets, sunlight glinting off cobblestones, laughter echoing through alleyways. "I learned a lot on that trip," he said. "About who I wanted to be. About how to treat people." I looked at him and noticed the way his hands paused mid-motion, as if he was holding the past carefully. "What was hard?" I asked gently. He exhaled, leaning against the counter. "Learning that love and respect aren't always easy," he said. "Sometimes they require patience. Sometimes understanding. Sometimes just listening." Took me a long time to realize that. And I hope it doesn't take you as long. Those words settled between us like a soft weight. Not heavy, just real. And suddenly I realized, he wasn't just giving advice. He was describing what he had been trying to do with me all along. Teaching me by example. Showing me, in the quietest ways, what it meant to connect. We ate dinner at the table, the room warm under the light. Conversation drifted naturally. Sometimes trivial, sometimes reflective. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a child sitting across from a father. I felt like a person sitting with another person. After the dishes, he suggested we step outside. The sky was deep navy, stars scattered like tiny punctures of light. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of frost and pine. We stood side by side on the porch, hands in our pockets, breathing clouds into the air. Neither of us spoke at first. Then he asked, almost like a whisper, "Do you ever wonder how people can be so close to someone and still miss what's right in front of them?" I swallowed, feeling that question sink into my ribs. "All the time," I admitted. "I think we spend so much time looking ahead, worrying about what's next, that we forget what's here." He nodded slowly. His hand brushed mine, accidental at first, but it lingered just enough for me to feel it. "Exactly," he said. "That's why these moments matter more than we realize. They shape us. They remind us connection doesn't always have to be loud." I looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time I saw the depth of his presence. He wasn't perfect. He carried regret like most people do. But he was real. And in that quiet porch moment, I realized the bond we were building was stronger than anything I had imagined. Not built on speeches. Built on presence. The following morning, I woke up with a strange sense of anticipation, like something important was quietly unfolding even if the day looked ordinary on paper. I walked downstairs. The kitchen was filled with pale gold dawn light. My dad sat at the table with coffee in his hands, staring out the window. In that light he looked older, the lines on his face more defined, his eyes carrying time. But there was also something else. Softness. Or maybe I had only just become capable of seeing it. "Morning, Dad," I said quietly. He turned, and his small smile felt like an entire conversation. "Morning, Eliana. Sleep well." "I did," I said, sitting opposite him. "You look better than usual," he replied, and there was sincerity in it. I laughed softly, almost embarrassed. He took a sip of coffee. "I think we're both learning how to slow down," he said. We sat in silence for a while. The fridge hummed. The neighborhood woke up in the distance. No pressure to fill the air. Just peace. Then he spoke again, lower this time, reflective. "Eliana, I want to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He inhaled slowly, then set his cup down like the moment required respect. "I know I haven't always been easy to understand," he said. "I wasn't always good at showing feelings. I didn't always say what I should have." He paused, eyes fixed on the table for a second. "But I have always loved you. Always. And I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." The words hit me so hard my body reacted before my mind could. My throat tightened. My eyes stung. And I realized I'd been holding my breath for years without knowing it. I wanted to answer right away. But the words didn't come cleanly. So I did the only honest thing I could do. He nodded. Then, barely above a whisper, "I love you too, Dad. More than I can even explain." He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. Simple gesture. But it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken moments. And in that touch, something inside me settled. Like a part of me that had been missing finally came home. Later that day we went for a drive. Spontaneous, no destination at first. The roads were quiet. The sky was pale blue and open. We let the hum of the engine fill the space. Then he said, "Do you remember that night in the kitchen? The one where we just sat there?" I smiled softly. "Of course. I don't think I'll ever forget it." "Neither will I," he said. "I think that was the beginning of something important. Not just for us, for me." He glanced at me briefly, then back to the road. "I realized connection isn't always about words," he said. "It's about presence. And that night, you gave me that without even knowing it." My chest tightened again. "I think you gave me the same thing," I said. "That silence showed me how to see you. Really see you." We drove in silence after that. But it wasn't empty. It was warm, contemplative, like gratitude taking up space. By the time we returned home, the sun was setting, painting the walls in gold and rose. We stood on the porch again, watching the last light fade. "I think this is one of those moments," he said softly, "that stays with you forever. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I whispered. "I feel it too." That night, lying in bed, I thought back to everything. The kitchen silence. The apples. The walks. The porch. The hand over mine. And I realized something that changed the way I understood life. Life isn't made of grand gestures. It's made of ordinary days where love is present. Where attention matters. Where you notice the people you care about while they're still right there. And I understood, finally, what that first quiet evening had truly given me. The power of presence. The depth of unspoken understanding. And the enduring strength of family. In the silence between us, I had discovered something extraordinary. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.